Hello, good evening, and welcome. I'm John Lazarus with Stories Matter and D&E Publishing. A few months ago, I made a tutorial about writing a memoir. Unfortunately, the response was lukewarm, but I realized that was because none of you think your life story is worth telling, or that your life basically has any meaning at all. Which, fair enough. But if your own life lacks substance, there's a whole world of people out there who readers want to know about. Athletes, politicians, porn stars. Heck, to feel better about themselves, people will even read books about disabled people. These are called biographies, and we'll learn how to write them today in today's video. But first, a word from our sponsor. Today's video is brought to you by rubber dishwashing gloves. If you're like me, you're tired of scalding your hands while washing dishes or cutting them on the garbage disposal trying to retrieve a locket you found under a park bench. But more importantly, rubber dishwashing gloves are an essential tool in the dumpster diver's kit. Whether you're poor, thrifty, eco-conscious about food waste, or just really curious about a favorite celebrity's blood type, you probably spend a lot of your time digging through the trash. Rubber gloves help protect you from most kinds of tetanus and have been proven to increase dumpster diving time by 45 minutes. And that 45 minutes could mean an expired piece of salmon or a perfectly good pair of binoculars that just needs new lenses. Visit any supermarket for more information. Okay. Well, writing a biography might seem like a daunting task. There seems to be so many obstacles. For starters, how do you condense such accomplished, interesting people's entire lives into a few hundred pages? And how are you supposed to compete with behind-the-music documentaries or Wikipedia? And what if, in the course of your research, you uncover some uncomfortable truths, like that Bush did 9/11, or that Jesus was actually Jewish? But try not to overthink it. A biography is no different than any other story you'll ever write. People want conflict. They want real human emotion. They want any insight and truth about how they can also become famous. If you can do all that and not misspell the subject's name on the front cover, you'll be fine. Let's take a look at some helpful hints to make these biographies really pop. Step 1. Seek permission. Or better yet, choose a dead person. Of course, the journey starts with picking your subject for your biography. People often want to read stories of inspirational figures like Steve Jobs, who achieved great success and overcame the handicap of being physically incapable of treating others with decency and respect. But if you're not overly concerned with book sales, you could write about anyone, really, like a grandmother who raised you after your parents died, or an uncle who lived as a hermit and claimed to have invented a machine that cured cancer. The latter might be better anyway, as most famous people will threaten legal action if you don't get permission. And those contracts will often be very creatively stifling as a writer. When I tried to write a biography of Tom Cruise, I was forbidden from mentioning his sex dungeon, the lamb's blood and cow placenta he bathes in to fight the aging process, nor his most closely guarded secret, that he actually has Down syndrome. Of course, the best action is to choose a person long dead, as all of the horrible things they did can usually be hand-waved away as a sign of the times. Even if, it turns out, not everyone in the 1970s was cool with marrying your first cousin. Step 2. Write your thesis. A biography, of course, doesn't have to be a simple chronological retelling of a life from birth to death. You need to choose an angle from which to examine your subject. If you have a lot of time on your hands, you could write a biography that uses its subject to look at half a century of an entire city. You could focus on how a famous band changed the musical landscape, instead of the sordid details of their sexual exploits. You could condense the story to a successful military campaign, or the passing of an important political bill. When I wrote Frankie Muniz, A Boy Among Men, I knew my focus wasn't going to be on child acting or the race car driving talent of my subject, but rather I would use him as a lens in which to view the momentous changes of the American social landscape in the early 2000s. Step 3. Choose a writing style. Like anything you write, the biography is really more about you than anything else. You should choose a tone and voice that you're comfortable with, and that your longtime readers expect from you. If you write 1,000-page high fantasy novels with prose that's particularly florid and purple, your Taylor Swift biography should reflect that. Fortunately for you, Taylor Swift fans will consume anything. However, you have to be careful. If comedy comes naturally to you, you might not be the best person to tell the story of a survivor of the Khmer Rouge or the story of a true artist like Bono. It's not a bad idea, then, to choose a voice and tone with a connection to your subject. If you were writing about Senator Huey Long, you might want the punchy, sardonic voice and tone of noir and detective fiction. And if you're writing about Shakespeare, well, you better make sure to maintain that iambic pentameter. Step 4. Structure it like a story. As I said before, an entire human life doesn't usually neatly fit a 3-act structure. If that were true, most people would peak at about 65. But generally, the only dramatic decision we make at that point in our lives is whether or not we want to kill ourselves so we no longer become a burden on our family. So instead, think of the story in terms of exposition, conflict, rising action, and climax. Discoveries, expeditions, and winning People's Choice Awards are all things you can build toward. Biographies about Isaac Newton that don't climax with him inventing gravity, or of Jane Goodall that don't climax with her taming the modern chimp, are probably going to be a letdown. This gets tricky, though, for famous people who died young and in exciting ways. Despite their cinematic endings, people don't necessarily want to think of Lincoln as a man with poor situational awareness, or as Paul Walker as a guy who didn't know how to drive a car. Just remember, biographies aren't so much about the truth as they are about making someone's life feel like a movie. That's all for today. Hit that subscribe button if you haven't already, and I'll leave you with this week's This Day in Literary History. See you on the next one.